Welcome to the All Things Endurance podcast. I'm your host, Rick Prince, and today we have on our podcast strength conditioning specialist Lori Thomson. Lori, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. So before we get into the meat and potatoes of it, perhaps you could give me a little bit of a background education, what you're working on, how strength conditioning and that whole aspect came into to sort of being your forte.
Sure. Yeah, so a little background. I've been doing this for 16 years. I've been studying it for 18 years. Started it in my undergrad, and my focus was exercise science. I went through an MBA as well because I wanted the business side of exercise science, which is a completely different route than I've ever seen and heard people go through. And I took a huge break after my MBA and just started working as a strength conditioning coach. And probably about 4 years ago, 3.5 years ago, I pursued a PhD. That is kind of the end all be all of education for anybody, unless you're going into like medical school. And I don't see myself memorizing as much as them. So the PhD has just pursued me that I really wanted to do research around strength conditioning. I have people that I follow that are doctorates that are just diagnosing how important strength conditioning is for a numerous amount of individuals from young to old. And the path that I've kind of started to go into is strength training for endurance athletes.
Hmm.
My background in sports is I grew up a soccer player.
Okay.
And it's ironic because if you were to tell me to go do a 2 mile run, I would be so upset.
That's funny.
So if you said I can go do plyometrics, do sprints on a soccer field, that was my jam back then. But I gradually shifted my way into endurance myself. Uh, you know, I still had to be really good at soccer. So my mind of a teenager shifted towards, well, what are the things I need to do to be a great soccer player?
Hmm.
I grew up very talented. And I'm very grateful of that. And then starting to do some long runs, I'm like, wow, I'm actually enjoying this.
Hmm.
So around 2007, doing my strength conditioning, I started doing some triathlons. Didn't get into it very heavily. And then it took me a couple years. By 2011, I started doing half Ironmans.
Okay.
Um,
Wow.
and completely shifted boats. My soccer career stopped. And while I was doing strength conditioning with athletes and like general population people, I was pursuing 5 years of Ironman, and I stayed with it for a long time because I
Hmm.
had two of the best coaches I could have asked for from a starting career, and
Hmm.
it was Siri Lindley and Rebecca Keat.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Siri's a legend.
And I had worked with them, and I loved them and adored them, and um, it just became a passion to me to stay in the endurance field. And Rebecca Key had recognized that I was a very good cyclist.
Okay.
And I kind of shifted towards doing biking because I loved it so much.
Hmm.
And ever since then, I've stayed in cycling. I do a lot of endurance races, mountain biking, gravel racing, and on the side, I'm doing my doctorate. I'm coaching athletes in strength conditioning, and that's where I'm at today.
That's awesome. That is awesome. That's a lot of stuff.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And now you ran your own training studio, correct? Your own strength conditioning studio.
Yeah, I had lived in Chicago pretty much my entire life, so 18 years, just recently moved to the suburbs. But prior to the suburbs, it was about 6 years of owning my facility and my company. Um, and around that time, pursuing my doctorate while I had a business too, started to become a lot.
Hmm.
And I had kind of a come to Jesus moment where my passion was still in education. And I started shifting towards coaching development, and meeting with coaches, how to help them. And I, of course, was doing it in the studio that I own downtown Chicago, but I realized I didn't truly enjoy being a business owner at that
Mm.
point,
Yeah.
uh, which kind of hit right at the same time COVID hit. So I was kind of saying, I need to part ways with owning the business,
Okay.
because I wanted to pursue a more research side of what I love the most, which is strength conditioning.
Got it. Got it. So now you're sort of able to blend both of your passions, strength conditioning, and endurance sports, and then kind of wrapping that all up in the research component then.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I maybe have a stack of papers upstairs, probably 2 feet high, that it doesn't intimidate me. I love reading articles because I love divulging what is not in certification books,
Mm.
and it's completely different what is coming out versus what was 20 years ago. So yeah, I completely shifted towards more of like the research side, and I love it.
That's awesome. Well, it's great when someone loves the research component because it is so obviously needed. Um, So let's get into talk about, I think you have a very unique perspective coming from strength training, coming from, soccer and now morphing over into endurance sports. I've been involved in endurance sports probably since I was 14. I started racing bikes and it's strength training. It's almost like it's at odds with, not that it is, I mean, it's complementary, obviously, but from most endurance athletes' perspective, it's sort of this misnomer. It's sort of like we don't do that. We don't go to the gym. We just ride or run or swim a lot. So why do you think that is? And then is this changing? Have you seen sort of a shift in your career where endurance athletes, it's not like a four-letter word anymore. It's becoming more accepted.
Yeah, I think there's a two-part to that. I think if we look back at 10, even just 10 years ago, I think a lot of endurance coaches just wanted to do endurance training, and not have a background in strength training. And I think the only component is to look at the history. Is if athletes had a history of strength conditioning, they'll continue to do it. And also, if the coach has a history of strength conditioning, they'll implement it and know the reason where to implement it for those athletes. And I think um, the second part is not knowing enough about strength conditioning,
Mm,
which I think is why it's coming to light nowadays, because people are expressing the importance around strength conditioning for endurance athletes. But the problem that we're seeing is, even though we're researching and knowing what to do with personal trainers and how they're working with endurance athletes, they don't know where to implement it. They don't know
mm.
what days to do it. An off day is now becoming a strength day.
Yeah.
And that's not really good for endurance athletes, whether it's a marathoner, whether it's a person that is an ultra runner or a cyclist. They're not knowing where to put the strength conditioning in because
Yeah.
they're just learning about it.
Yeah.
So I think the phase of strength training education is coming to light a lot more. And coaches are wanting to learn so much more about it because we have so much more research
Yeah.
into that field now. I don't think there was as much back then, so we didn't know what the reasons were that endurance athletes needed to take a 2-hour run day off to do strength training instead. We
Hmm.
didn't have that science to support like we do nowadays.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I think I mentioned this on another podcast. It's funny in the cycling world, actually in like November, December, when a lot of the pro teams have their training camps, they have like almost this obligatory photo shoots of the whole team in the gym. They're doing sit-ups and push-ups and squats and all this stuff. But then, which is fine, but the problem is they never touch weights again for the rest of the year. It's kind of like if you do three sessions in the winter, you're good to go for the rest of the year. And
Yeah.
and it's so funny to me how like antiquated that model is. And hopefully, again, it's changing a little bit. And I think the other problem, this is at least my perspective on it, is that this isn't true, but even if that was true, that strength training was a liability for pro cyclists or pro runners, which it's not, clearly. But even if it were, that doesn't necessarily translate to the average person who wants to do strength training to, lose fat, look better, osteoporosis. So I feel like there's so many obviously health reasons aside from even the endurance sports element, right? That it's just critically important.
Yeah. And I think looking at the difference in those two type of people is the professional athlete is, I think it's also beginning to become a lot tougher for them because they have to travel more,
Sure.
or in group rides more. So having the availability when they do travel for the right components for strength training, it becomes tougher.
Yeah.
Um, and I think the general population person, I think it just goes back to just intimidation,
Yeah.
not having education around it. Even if they were to go into a gym, I mean, you ask a person if they've ever worked with a coach, there's such a high percentage that people just go into the gym to try to lift a little bit to get a benefit out of it and don't have the education behind it, whether they've seeked someone to assist them. But yeah, it goes back to a lot of people don't know much about strength training.
Yeah.
And if you were to look at also the male and female difference, males can go in and their buddies are there and they've been there and it's been in male sports a lot longer,
Sure.
even for younger generations for high school. And it hasn't been with females as long. It has been studied for females as
Yeah, it's a good
long
point.
as well. So it rolls into, if it has been studied long and now you have these baby boomers and even younger in the 50s that had never been educated, they're just going to do what they enjoy and what they know
Yeah.
and don't seek the people that actually can benefit them in some way with strength training.
Yeah, that's a great point. The majority of my career was spent as a personal trainer, and I remember to this day, the first day I ever set foot in a gym. To your point, me and my idiot buddy back in high school, we joined a gym for the summer. I think we were like 17 because there was some discounted membership, and they had like the almost like the Cybex room all selectorized, and then they had the free weight room, and it was full of these huge guys throwing weight around, screaming. I'm like, oh my God, like we're not going, don't go in there. Like that's just, and even with the selectorized machines, we had no idea what we were doing. It was, but I always think back to that, like when I would work with clients in the gym, I would always try to remember how I felt walking into the gym that time. And it was complete intimidation, not just about the people that were there, but the fact that I had no idea what I was doing. Like we were literally each selectorized piece of equipment, we were reading the label on it to say, oh, this does your quads. You're supposed to sit like this on this machine. And I think, when you're around that for long enough, you kind of forget that that's maybe not the majority, but a lot of people's experience when they walk into a gym.
Yeah. I mean, I'm 16 years into personal training and strength coaching, and I walk into a brand new gym. I could walk up to a machine without looking at any of the information, be like, okay, this is a lateral raise machine. There's some sort of experience when you look at equipment, and it might not
Yeah.
be intimidating because you've used it at some point.
Yeah.
But a beginner coming into a gym, and you're literally coming into a gym, you don't know where to walk, you don't know where
Sure.
things are, you don't know how the equipment is set up, and you go to a machine, you don't know what weight to start with. You have to look at the pictures.
Yeah.
And you see someone looking at the pictures and doing super lightweight, and then they're done after one try because they didn't like it. So there's
Yeah.
an education. It
Yeah.
just, it literally continues to wrap around education.
Yeah.
You have someone that walks into a brand new gym. Where do they walk first? A treadmill.
Yeah, it's
That's why
true.
the treadmills are right in the front, because everyone knows how to work a treadmill.
Yeah. Yep.
They know how to
Yep.
work a stationary bike.
Yeah.
So they put those in the front because those are the most basic things that people are looking for because they're so comfortable with them.
Right.
Where dumbbells are in the back of the room.
I never thought about that. You're absolutely
It-
right, though.
it's so intimidating.
Yeah.
Um, and to this day, it is the same setup. It's the same setup
Interesting.
in gyms. Uh,
Yeah.
and the tough thing is there's new fitness companies coming out that are making equipment even biomechanically efficient for joint angle and joint movement and the
Mm.
changes. But that becomes even more intimidating for the average person to walk in a
Right.
gym. They're like, I don't know what to do with this. I'm not going to do it. I'm
Yeah.
just going to go back to my treadmill.
Yep. Yep. That's true. That's a great point. That's a great point. Yeah, something I didn't even really think about. But yeah, you're right. Every gym I've been in, it's exactly that setup for sure. Um, so this is maybe sort of a very high level question as far as like sort of generic, but what are some of the benefits for endurance athletes? Like why, if I'm an endurance athlete, I put in, X amount of hours or running or biking or swimming and I'm pretty fit and whatever, like why do I even need to do strength training? Like what are some benefits for me?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of benefits. And it also depends on what type of athlete you are. So are you a beginner and you're intermediate, or are you an advanced? Beginners is going to have a higher percentage of benefits from strength training.
Okay.
And at advanced, they probably have already done strength training. So the benefits are going to be a lot smaller because of the definition of where they need that adaptation. So in terms of basic benefits for endurance athletes, it's injury prevention. I think I think that's so broad though for me to say. I was thinking about that and writing that down earlier because you could have an ultra runner go out and they did some amazing strength training, but they rolled their ankle. Like
Sure.
our strength training is not to make everything perfect and full 100% injury prevention. It is to make you stronger so you can land appropriately or you can push the pedal more appropriately. I think there's a lot of insight on injury prevention around just the full body concept of strength training. If you're doing a lot more compound exercises, which is full body, multi-joint, it's the same as if you're a runner. You're using full body, multi-joint. So it kind of plays into the same synergistic movements that you're trying to do as an athlete. And people forget that. They forget how a squat synchronization can actually help penetrate the push off of a mountain when you're running up a mountain for an ultra
Mm.
runner. And to say I'm not an ultra runner, but I've been studying it since I've been working with UESCA. I've been studying the science behind it a little bit more. Um, Coordination, like strength training, there's a lot more control, right? You're putting weights in your hand. You have to control the movement. You have to control the weight. A huge component is just once you start to add weight and get strength gains, you're going to add some sort of control to the muscle, right? You're going to add the coordination of being able to push off and do plyometrics faster when you're running up a hill. And the same for cyclists or any other endurance athlete. Strength training puts control on muscle, and it helps when you're doing basic runs, easy runs, or even someone that is doing a walk, like a run walk.
Yeah.
I think plyometrics is a huge component of strength training as well, but you need strength in order to do power moves.
Right.
So and when you think of it, power is always part of runners. At any pace, you are landing almost 3 times your body weight sometimes, depending on the speed that you're going. So if you can articulate that into strength training, where you actually need to lift certain things, like some components, you're going to be able to land faster in that 3 times land when you're running. So the strength's going to help the actual components of endurance athletes. And I think a couple last things with the benefits of strength training is just being reactive. Even with cyclists, you have to be reactive in corners, depending on what type of race criterium you have to attack at certain times. So the reaction of the lower body, the strength of being able to sprint super fast and then be done in 10 seconds plays a part with how strong you need to be in the gym as well.
Yeah.
And then I think just the reaction of like runners is you think of the time that a runner in a marathon is running for an average person, it's between the 3 and 4 hour marker. So they're going to be running a little bit slower than advanced. So once you start to add strength training in the idea of power onto it, over a given amount of time to implement that program, you're going to allow that person to be able to run a little bit faster in that 3 to 4 hour marker. And I think it just depends on that person. It goes back to, if you're a beginner, you're going to be doing beginner moves. But I think overall, I think strength training benefits all aspects of all endurance sports. I can tell you, you have a full pull-up day, and people forget how much the lats come to play as runners, right?
Yeah.
Moving that
Yeah.
arm. Why do we want to work on pull-ups? So it kind of plays into just what is the goal of that person? What are their goals for that race? And then why do we want to do strength training, and how often?
Got it. And I think you make a great point. I think that so much, especially sort of historically, has been, if strength training was even mentioned for endurance athletes, it's just, well, you just need to be stronger because it's going to help you. But there was never sort of that conversation about the direct application that you mentioned, like that running is a ballistic sport, right? And that, strengthening, the muscles and the connective tissue and all that kind of stuff. And I feel like it's, again, back to your point, original point of the education, I think it's so critically important because I think if you can tell a runner or a cyclist or whoever, a triathlete, this is going to help your performance, they're much more inclined to do it than just do it because, it'll make you stronger. Like that's so sort of ambiguous. So I think things are moving in the right direction. I'm sure there's still hesitancy on some because I think the other thing I don't know if you've come across this with your athletes that you work with it, but because I think strength training isn't valued as much as it should, it's almost viewed as a liability where, okay, I take a day off the bike or running, I take a day off my cardio to lift a couple weights. That's going to make me worse. Like so do you ever encounter that sort of perspective on things? And if so, maybe how do you kind of get their mind back to, okay, it's not a liability. This is going to be helping you.
Yeah, I think it's just part of educating your athletes and educating coaches, because I think part of it is, if the athlete doesn't know that they're about to be sore working through an eccentric phase, they're not going to know what the benefit of that is and how they feel.
Yeah.
So they're going to consider it as a detriment, like you just said, to their training, because they're going to get on their bike sore.
Right.
They're going to go out running sore, and they think that as a negative component.
Hmm.
I think a huge thing for coaches is to understand that you need to educate whenever you're kind of changing up strength for a phase for that athlete. You need to educate the athlete on what they're going to feel potentially
Yeah.
for that phase in strength training. Because if you are strength training, or if you're programming strength training correctly, you will go through concentric, eccentric, and isometric, right? The
Yeah.
three components of strength training. However, you're always going to have concentric a lot more in the programming. You're going to have eccentric a little bit less, but the eccentric is where we start to see some soreness, to
Yeah.
be just very on the basic terms, like soreness from the athletes. And if you don't articulate in that phase what they potentially might feel and why, and then why the program is set up like that, we're going to see a lot of pushback on, why am I doing strength training?
Yeah. That's a really good point. I didn't even think about the DOMs or the discomfort perspective of that.
Yeah.
Um, so
And
you hit on, oh,
I'll,
go
I'll say
ahead.
I'll say one more thing to that. I was on a call yesterday also too with an athlete. They have a race coming up. I was kind of overseeing and helping on this call with Team EF that I'm on, and the athlete was saying, "Man, I'm really sore from the workout that they just did this weekend." And it was Tuesday. So in terms of physiology, they still have a good amount of time for recovery before
Sure.
leading up to their Saturday and Sunday race. So the coach, my director, was talking about why we want a little bit of power movement and soreness way before the potential of a race to benefit that race. So he did an amazing job educating.
Mm,
I understand you're sore. That's why we're taking more breaks this week before you're going up to the race. He's articulating information correctly. And he also just had to remind, like, yes, we knew you were going to be sore this week for just a little bit of it, because it's actually going to dissipate and help you with the power moves that you're going to be doing in the criterium this weekend,
mm,
which is awesome. So I think there's just a reiteration of education to athletes, because they're not the ones studying these things. They're not,
sure.
unless they have been doing it for a long time, they're not going to understand that I am sore leading up to a race. This does not sound correct.
Yeah. 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 It's almost the opposite probably in their mind, right?
Yeah.
Um, so you had mentioned before about, and this is maybe one of the biggest areas I think that is sort of interesting about our discussion today, about the integration of a strength training program into an endurance program, because I think a lot of people, and whether it be personal trainers, endurance athletes themselves, endurance athletes coaches, don't really understand that. So if you could, what are some sort of key elements of how to properly integrate strength training with an endurance program? And of course, it'll vary, obviously based on the individual, their schedule, and a lot of other variables. But are there any sort of almost universal things that you would say on that topic?
So we're kind of talking about concurrent training, correct?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. So um, I think the first thing to say is just it depends on where they are in their season. Okay.
Okay.
So concurrent training is a combination of strength training and endurance on a given day or throughout the week. Generally, we're seeing it where people want to do a little bit of endurance and strength training, and then where to put it. Is strength training supposed to be at the beginning of the day and endurance at the end of the day, or vice versa? So there's an answer to that, and then there's still science on that. So I'm going to kind of answer towards what the science is correctly on that.
Okay.
Uh, concurrent training is based on the season. So I'm just going to break it up in super simple seasons. We have an off season, we have a base season, a build season, and a peak season. The peak season is generally leading right into any event or goal that an individual has. So during off season, I believe athletes should be doing strength training more often in order to see strength gains. Strength gains generally come from hypertrophy. So in order to elicit hypertrophy, you need to strength train more often. So you're going to see more strength training instead of the endurance during off season to increase those hypertrophy demands. Um, and so in terms of base, build, and peak, we're going to see more of that concurrent training, because we're trying to do strength training generally just by itself during off season to have those demands, because you're going to be lifting a little bit heavier. You're going to be seeing longer lift sessions and more lift sessions.
Okay.
During base season, you're going to start to see a build in volume, generally with endurance athletes. So once that volume comes up, you're not going to necessarily see quite a bit of a drop in strength training. You're going to see that concurrent session. Depending on the day and the goal for that day for the endurance athlete, such as an easy run, we might see a strength training on that day. And more often we'll see total body combo days, because of
Okay.
not being able to get as much strength training in during the week.
Okay.
If I were to tell an endurance athlete that they're going to be doing strength training 3 times a week, sometimes people can't do that as often. And you can't get in an hour of strength training, which would be a huge benefit. We might only see 30 minutes from the beginning. So during base, we want to see the strength training at the beginning of the day, because it is still a focus for that athlete, because they're not in higher interval phases quite yet.
Okay.
So strength training should generally be at the beginning of the day. And this isn't just coming from what I've worked with, it's coming from a lot of the articles that I've been reading the past couple of years.
Okay.
It's just depending on that base phase and the day that what they're doing on that day for the endurance program. You get into your build phase, you're going to see the intensity increase as well. So you're going to see more intervals, you're going to see more track work in that phase as well. So on those days, it depends on what the intensity is on that day. So if we have a track day, normally an interval day in the morning, we're going to see strength training more often in the evenings.
Okay.
So then the focus changes because the focus is more on that runner and their programming than the strength training.
Okay.
So as we started for off season, strength training generally by itself on some days with timing, you can be doing it with endurance on the base phase. You're going to start to see strength training at the beginning and endurance in the afternoon. Build, you're going to see strength training generally at the end, depending on that type of intensity for the day.
Okay.
And then in peak phase, we're going to see the timing of the sessions go down a little bit because you're actually trying to get into more of a power and plyometric phase because of trying to change up the demand that they're going to see in peak and goal phase. You try to match that energy system that they're in. So if your energy system is more in, I'm getting ready for a race, so I'm doing more intervals before my last 2 weeks of deloading, you want to match the strength training with the energy system that they're in as well.
Okay.
You won't necessarily see super heavy eccentric work. You'll see more explosive work at that time.
Okay.
So it depends on that season for that athlete. But with research, they're seeing just depending on the season of that endurance athlete, whether a cyclist, a runner, even a swimmer, it's the component of seasons. The second thing, which is, I'll just throw kind of in for a second, is depending on the intensity of that day. So if one day on a Monday is an easy run and another day is a tempo or interval run, generally you're still going to match the intensity of that athlete as well. So what energy system are they going to be doing? So if it's an easy run, I generally won't do 1 to 2 rep range. Let's max you out on an easy day with strength training. You want to be close in the intensity matching the actual endurance component as well.
Okay.
The interval day, if it's zone 3, zone 4, we can actually match sometimes that intensity with a run and do a harder lift.
Okay.
Because their body is going to take a little bit longer to adapt to that intensity. We actually are going to have them at that intensity a lot longer. So if I have someone lifting pretty heavy in the morning, it might benefit them with their interval run in the afternoon. So science is saying stay within that energy system or in an adjacent energy system from what you're doing for that endurance.
Okay. Yeah, it's fascinating because I feel like, experienced endurance athletes or even beginners understand periodization when it comes to even at the most basic level when it comes to the cardiovascular programming, sort of like you said, the sort of off season, base season, and everything. But strength training, I feel like from a periodization standpoint, is even if people know about strength training, they probably do the same type of thing. They just maybe keep lifting heavier because your body adapts. But to the point of training, in conjunction with the energy system or, really understanding the concurrent training, it's just the knowledge isn't there again, which goes back to your original point of just education, 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 because I mean, I feel like most people would not put together strength training and periodization in the same sentence.
Yeah, I agree. And I think I do think strength training programming is difficult. I can't say like you can learn it overnight and then start to implement it. It has just been a continuous search for why. Like,
Sure.
why would I do this program? The biggest thing I'm researching right now for a lot of the science is when do we implement eccentric and when do we implement isometric and how a lot of the research is saying 70% of your program is going to be concentric.
Okay.
20% is going to be eccentric and 10% is going to be isometric.
Got it.
Crazy. No general person is going to know that, but also
Right.
where to put that in a program.
Sure.
Am I going to tax an athlete that is going into a race a week out with eccentric work? Probably not,
Right.
because they're going to be so sore. So
Sure.
there's timing, and there's science. There's so much science coming out, like I said before, about this. So
Yeah.
periodization, I think, is just evolving
Yeah.
every year because we're trying to understand what is best for that athlete. I think there's no exact answer.
Yeah.
I think just start to strength train, like
Yeah.
start to do basics. People look on social media and they're like, cool, someone's doing a Bosu ball squat with a barbell on their back doing it. Like, why is it that difficult?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and athletes think that they should be doing something that advanced.
Yeah.
I just stick with the foundations, just like you do with your off season. You're doing easy runs, you're working on preventative injuries that you've had over the year. Just start with foundations.
Yeah.
And
That's
I think people make it so difficult.
But that's a great point, though. And this is something that didn't exist, obviously, when I was younger, the whole social media element, like Instagram and TikTok and all that. Like, and there's all these like crazy, sort of like, sort of the sexy ton of stuff out there. Like, oh, that's really complicated and cool looking, without an understanding of what's really required to do that. And is that even, do you even need that in the first place? Right. But it's cool looking. So I want to do it versus just like A, you're not there yet, and B, you probably don't even need to be doing it. It's just like it just looks really cool, unless you're joining a circus or something, right?
Oh my gosh, yes. There's crazy stuff out there.
There
When I look,
is.
I'm like, wow, good for you. But shit, I wouldn't give that to a client.
Yeah, no, they end up in the ER. Endurance athletes historically, I feel like also shy away from lifting heavyweight, and I guess heavyweight being like whatever's heavy for them, right? Because that's a domain of power lifters, bodybuilders. That's look, I pedal at 120 RPMs. That's clearly not a lot of pressure compared to like squatting. So why should I be doing that, or running, for example? What is like, is that just completely, I just don't need that? Or should I be lifting heavy? So figured I'd like to get sort of your thoughts on that as well.
Yeah, you don't want to be Arnold. That's what you're saying?
Yeah, well, I'd love to be Arnold. My genetics say otherwise, but
Yeah. Yeah. Um, yeah, I think it depends on the person. I will say that because there are some hidden medical sides to an individual that we might not be aware of where they shouldn't lift heavyweight.
okay,
Um, someone might not be able to for some scoliosis. I generally, depending
sure,
on the person in their history and the severity of it, might not put them in a heavyweight phase. And also any individuals that are having like immune issues, you could tax someone and heavy lift and they could be out for weeks, depending on if they can recover from that, and then what they're going medically through.
okay,
Um, on the other side, with just endurance, the average endurance athlete, I think there's a time to bring in heavy lifting, and generally that is in off season.
okay,
Um, I think with endurance athletes, we're trying to do more of a maintenance program throughout the main part of the season because of such a high volume with running and cycling that you are going to lose some of that strength training. So the maintenance is maintaining the strength that you work through for 6, potentially 12 weeks in off season to maintain that strength during your season.
hmm,
And so I will say a lot of the information out there is saying that heavy training should be for anybody, and especially endurance athletes, but during specific time, generally seen in off season.
okay,
Uh, and it's tough because you can't say, okay, it's off season, let's do your 1 rep max right away. Like,
right,
you have to build into that heavy phase.
sure,
So that's why I don't think it's a bad thing that endurance athletes do it. But I also think if you're going to get into heavy lifting, and see some strength gains with heavy lifting, 3 reps, 4 reps, see a coach for a little while,
Yeah,
because you might be doing a deadlift that is not proper technique. And that's where the injuries come in. And
sure.
that's where they don't want to do the strength training anymore because their back is so taxed the next day.
Yeah,
I think the other thing is they don't understand that they're doing it wrong. So they just think that movement that they did, that they've seen on social media, is going to benefit them. And now they don't feel good doing it.
yeah, yeah.
So
That's a good point.
I think every endurance athlete should do heavy lifting. I think at the right time and through the right incremental progression in a program. Um, and then I think you can maintain it at certain points leading up into like base and build phase. And then eventually you're going to start to get out of that neurology phase, that the neural path of 1 rep, 2 rep, 3 rep,
Mhm.
into more of a 6 to 12 rep for that athlete.
Okay.
I think people need to practice it, practice heavy lifting,
Yeah.
because you can injure yourself.
Yeah, that's a great point about working with a coach, and I don't think a lot of people, especially when you watch Instagram or TikTok or whatever, especially when you see someone really proficient at like I feel like any athlete or any, you see someone really proficient at it, they make it look so damn easy. Like, oh, I could do that. Like I was just watching a video of Michaela Schifrin doing the slalom. Like I can ski. Yeah, actually that doesn't look that hard. It's insanely hard. And I think things like squatting, deadlifting to the uneducated eye, these are like, oh, that's a pretty basic movement. It's an insanely complex movement, mechanically and timing and everything. So I think that's it's great advice about coaching because you can injure yourself, obviously, pretty, pretty severely if you don't know what you're doing in there.
Yeah, yeah. And I think it just goes back to just understanding why eventually you need to lift heavy and at what phase. I think another thing that comes with heavy lifting is technique.
Yeah,
In terms of like loading and deloading. If you have someone that's about to do a dumbbell bench press and they have super heavy in their hands, they can do the weight you already know ahead of time. Otherwise, you wouldn't be doing that weight, but they don't know how to take the weights down.
yeah,
That could also be a component of just teaching the athlete on how to take dumbbells to the ground safely
yeah.
instead of just throwing them away when you're at a
Right.
big lifetime gym and hopefully not hitting the person next to you on the other bench. So
Yeah,
I think it's just super basic components is, how do you rack a heavy weight? How do you get
yep,
out of a heavy weight if you can't push it up or pull it up?
yeah,
How do you put heavy weight in your hand? What's the type of different grips what's a stronger grip versus a more advanced grip? So I think a lot of heavy lifting, so many components come with it. But I also think that's not so many components that you can't learn it. That's why
yeah,
I'm saying go work with a coach for a couple weeks, like a
yeah,
month to 3 months, and have them teach those things for you so you can actually eventually do it on your own.
yeah.
Um, there's not that much out there that says you can't learn those things. It's just you haven't tried to learn those things.
Sure. So again, a good segue, I think, into the next question. So there's pretty much any gym you walk into, there's going to be personal trainers available for hire. Obviously, some better than others. And then people also hear the term strength conditioning. Especially people hear it in regard to like professional sports teams. D1 collegiate teams have strength and conditioning coaches. What's the difference between the personal trainer in, like you said, sort of a gym situation and a true strength conditioning specialist, maybe that works at the collegiate level or independently? um, is there a difference? And if I'm an endurance athlete seeking out, again, how to lift properly, form, how to progress, would you say they should steer one way or the other, or is it sort of just based off the individual person and what their knowledge base is?
I mean, I think there's a little bit of a difference. A little bit of a difference, honestly. I think there's a big spectrum of they both know how to move somebody. Um, Personal training, generally, you'll see in a big corporate gym. Strength coaches, you'll generally see with athletes, like athlete teams. Um, the big difference is a little bit of the science side. Generally, you'll see strength conditioning athletes seeking out like advanced power lifts.
Okay.
um, Olympic lifts, which is not bad. You'll see still some personal trainers know how to do those movements as well. But when it goes towards working with a coach, there's generally no difference in terms of when you walk into a gym and have a personal trainer, or you walk into like a small independent studio and you're seeking out a strength coach. Uh, I think it just depends on the athlete, but I generally will see there's no big difference when you're seeking a coach.
Okay.
I do say if people are seeking a coach, go test the gym out for a week and pay attention to the coaches that are around you. Because I think in any industry, and you'll say this too, Rick, any industry, there are good and bad coaches.
Sure.
My tip for this is walk into a gym and watch the coaches. Go on the floor where you're back on your treadmill, and you can see the coaches on the floor interacting, changing, cueing. They have a program with them, with their athletes. That is a good coach. That is a good coach that you want.
Yeah.
Um, because they're so in tune to that program. Because you are going to be at facilities where coaches are just there to get their athletes to move, and they don't have anything with them. They have their arms crossed. I unfortunately see the bad side, because I've been in personal training facilities for a long time, that you want to have someone that will give you change, that
Yeah.
will benefit you to want to strength train for the rest of your life,
Yeah.
not just this one goal that you have to finish a marathon and also lose 20 pounds while doing it. I think a good coach is somebody that is just so interactive with you and that has everything in front of them for their session for you. It is
Yeah.
a one big tip for any athlete seeking a coach.
Yeah, it's always so frustrating to me. Like, I for several gyms I ran the personal training department, and I would see coaches or trainers on the floor with their arms crossed or sitting on the floor watching TV, versus like as far I always say as far when if a quote unquote good coach or good personal trainer, there could be a million people in that room. There could be celebrities wandering around, but as far as that's concerned, there's only one other person in the room, and that's your client that you're working with. And I think so. I think those, it shows who takes their job seriously. So I think that's really good advice. I think it's really good
Yeah,
advice.
yeah, yeah. And I say watch the coach because um, you also see that they're rolling into multiple athletes. Like
Yeah.
they just have one and they're done for a while. They're normally going to have a pretty booked session with clients within the day. And you'll just see how interactive they are. I mean, I kneel quite a bit with
Yeah.
people that I meet with,
Yeah.
because I'm normally on my computer jotting down things after they do an exercise.
Sure.
So it's just how interactive do you want also that
Yeah.
coach to be with you on the other side of it is like, do
Yeah.
you want a coach that does cross their arms and gives you a program and then you're done for the day? Because realistically, you're there paying in 120 for 1 hour. That is quite expensive. So you want
Yeah.
to get what you're paying for that 1 hour.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I know I couldn't agree with you more. Um, Obviously there's a million different exercises out there. Going back to sort of the functional side, or specific side, I should say. Swimmers might get different exercises than a runner or cyclist, but are there any exercises that you would consider sort of foundational staple exercises for any endurance athlete out there that would benefit them?
I mean, I think the most basic ones, which is like a push and pull movement, upper body, horizontal push pull and movement, upper body. So there's four, and
Yeah.
then um, lower body. I think generally split squatting for endurance athletes.
Okay.
I think single leg split squatting, because you're using unilateral movements in
Yeah.
your sport generally. Whether it is a swimmer, because you're pedaling with single arm, you're alternating it just like a cyclist, you're alternating your legs. I think we have to use more unilateral movements and then advance those unilateral movements and keep going back and forth to both legs and single leg, because that'll help that strength gain over time. I think a lot of people should start doing pull-ups. A
Okay.
huge amount of people should do pull-ups because it is so demanding on our diaphragm, right? It is bringing so much strength in our upper body and the joint integrity of our shoulders, but it is increasing the demand of our diaphragm when we're rotating so much and running and in cycling that it's actually bringing a lot of strength to it. Instead of just doing ab work, pull-ups is doing a lot more demanding on upper body. And like that synchronization that I was telling you earlier, you're using multiple muscles in single movements to kind of pull over to the things that you're doing in a basic day, which is your general endurance sport. So
Gotcha.
I think the basics, overhead press and pull, you have a row to a chest press, and then you have a squat to a deadlift. And then changing those up from bilateral to unilateral.
Okay. Makes sense. Yeah. Again, I don't think it has to be complicated, right? People overcomplicate it,
No.
and maybe they go from, instead of, 1 to 2 to 3, they go from 1 to 60,
Yeah.
quickly, and then get injured. And so that's definitely good advice. Um, I think something like, as you noted, as the periodization progresses, as an athlete is doing more volume or more intensity, that obviously changes the strength training component. I was reading the other day, I think it's, as far as maintaining the strength that you get from base, is that, I think I was reading, if as long as you do basically one day, or maybe I forget if it's 1 or 2 days per week, um, to help, again, you're not going to gain, but you'll more or less maintain those gains that you've created through that base period. Is that what the research is also saying? So to know that it's, again, if I still do get that one day in during the season, not all is lost.
Yeah, man, there's a lot of articles that are challenging that right now.
Okay. Okay.
Um, yes, I would say, man, if you can at least, of course, get in one strength training session, 1 full hour, like it has to be no less than 1 hour in a week. Perfect, right?
Yeah.
That's all the time that you have. That's all the time that you can give. I
Yeah.
also think that we forget that we have super busy lives, especially people that have kids. And if that is all you can get in because you have so much more other things to do in your life, and then you also have to do your training for your nerd thing, get that one session in. In order to maintain, they're seeing 2 sessions a week, though.
Okay.
So they're saying 30 to 45 minutes to maintain once you're past the base phase.
Okay.
Um, so it just depends on the person. I can't say don't do, I can't say like you're giving me one session, but we need to do two. Like you can't tell people like that anymore
Sure.
because there's no way that they can change their lives
Yeah.
in order to get that second session in.
Yeah.
So I think to be um empathetic to what that person's coming with and their availability, give them all they can in that one session and do that one strength session. But a lot of science is saying at least 2 per week.
Okay. Okay. Um, it's interesting. I always, to some degree, hate those articles about like how the pros train, because people extrapolate from that. This is how I should train if I want to be really, really good, right? And one of our contributors, Nell Rojas, she's a professional runner, marathon runner, but she has such a unique take on it because she's also a coach. She coaches a lot of people. And she's like, look, don't do what I do. Like, you can't do that much, because when I'm done, I lay on the couch, and recover. That's my entire life. You have to pick the kids up at school, and you got to make dinner, and you got to do whatever job you go to. So I think it's important, to your point, to like you said, appreciate that every person, I guess, is different, and they have different lifestyles and different demands. And maybe that, I guess I'm trying to sum it up with sort of, something is better than nothing, right? And not try to be that ideal that you read about, and this is how XYZ pro trains, or again, whatever's on Instagram or TikTok.
Yeah, man, I've been my entire life, a huge person that as good as I'm going to get, that's how good I'm going to get. I'm not trying to challenge somebody else. I'm
Yeah.
not trying to be better than somebody else. I'm trying to be better than myself every day.
Yeah.
And to her extent, it's perfect. She is doing her training that may not be great for one of her athletes.
Right.
On the other side of that, I mean, you also want to be with a coach that you're seeing doing these great things.
Yeah, for sure.
Like you want to hear that they're doing a great job, but a lot of athletes will compare themselves to better athletes.
Yeah.
If you're competing, fantastic. Like that's what you should be doing. That's what you need to be better than them at.
Yeah.
But I think we compare ourselves to individuals way too often. Just like I said, I think a huge part of it is social media.
Yeah.
Uh, like you will see your coach do, like last week I did a 205-pound deadlift. My athletes cannot do that.
Right.
But I would love for them to see what I'm doing to be healthy, because I think a huge part is you walk the walk, you talk the talk, like do what you can do the best, but also tell your clients like, yeah, like I just did this, be excited about it, but say like, we're not going to do that. You're at a different phase in your
Yeah.
programming.
Yeah.
Um, and I think it's really good for athletes to see it, but I think people have to understand everyone is completely different.
Yeah. Yeah.
Everyone's completely different.
Yeah, completely agree. Completely agree. And yeah, it's challenging, I think, for some people to not, to see stuff out there every day on social media and being like, I want to do that, and then realizing that they can't. That's not, but yeah, it's always a challenge, I feel like. But
Yeah.
I do agree that it's definitely motivational. It's just a function of what's the expectation. How do you manage expectations, I suppose.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. My I'll give you an example. My brother has been a personal training and strength coach for 20 years.
Hmm.
It's in the family. And a long time ago, and he probably does this recent too. The only way that you comparing yourself to a coach would just be in a fun aspect. My brother does challenges with some of his athletes that are capable of actually meeting what he's doing in his programming.
Oh, nice.
They'll do 5K competitions. That's hard. That is very hard on your energy system.
Yeah.
No beginner can do that. And so he'll do challenges that are deadlifting, Olympic lifting, to see if his clients that are capable of doing that weight and those lifts can meet the coach's challenge.
Yeah.
So it's fun. There's those components that you can do that where your athletes can meet those demands that you're doing in the weight room
Yeah.
and when he's running. A 1 mile, can they beat him in his 4:10 minute mile, which is incredible. Um, but that's kind of the only time that I would see why you would kind of monitor what other people are doing, is
Yeah.
just kind of the fun, like have fun in your training. And he allows that.
That's
Because
awesome.
what happens is on that day you're doing the testing and trying to beat your coach, but you need to have fun during the entire training process leading up
Yes.
to
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. And I think you hit, not to kind of go off this topic too much, but I think just as far as training in general, I do think that for a lot of people, it starts off as fun, like, oh, I'm going to train for XYZ race, and then it gets not fun. Like people, especially endurance athletes, who I feel like are oftentimes sort of that type A, they put so much pressure on themselves and they get so wrapped up in just everything. It becomes just all about training and less about fun. Um, and and that's why, I'm sure you're familiar with that cyclist, Peter Sagan, who just recently retired. I think one of the reasons people loved him is because it never looked like he was like, yes, he trained, but it always seemed like he was just screwing around, having fun, you know?
Yeah.
And yes, he won 3 world championships in a row by having fun. But I feel like that's one thing that endurance athletes need to kind of remember, is like, most of us aren't doing this for the paycheck. We're just out there, should be having fun. And I think that's the other thing. I think when people lose motivation or burn out as athletes, it's because it's not fun anymore. And I think, it's really unfortunate. So I guess that's maybe the other component of, the cardiovascular program, the strength program. How can you implement all this so you're progressing, but also having fun in the process?
Yeah, I think it ends to one word, is what's your purpose?
Yeah. Yeah.
What's your purpose? What is this race? How does it make you feel when you finish this race?
Yeah.
On race day, like, how do you feel? How do you want to feel? So everything leading up to it, is what is your purpose? What is your intent in every single one? But doesn't have to be serious. It doesn't have to go out for a run and you completely forget like what's around you. You might have like a river that's completely beautiful
Yeah.
and you're not even noticing your environment.
Yeah.
Like there's just things that we forget that 90% is your training.
Yeah.
That couple days leading up to it, planning, being around an event, which is always fun, being around the people, is the best part because you've done all the training, you're feeling good, and you're going to have that one day, maybe two, depending on a cyclist, stage racing, so multiple days. Crazy people that do ultra running,
Yeah.
48 hours.
Right.
Um, you have those just couple of things that you're leading to the happiness. So what is your intent and purpose leading up to it? Mine is always just feeling good and happy and so happy that I can do these things as well.
Yes,
Like
that's a great point.
I'm not injured right now. I'm going to go out for a run and enjoy this run, but it also has intent to that run. I'm supposed to
Yeah.
do a simple run. So I think that's rolls back to strength training. Like we're losing what the purpose is for strength training because strength training is just to get that athlete strong for that event. But we're forgetting that strength training is for longevity.
Yeah.
It's going to strengthen your bones. Your muscles move your bones. Like muscles need to be strong in order for your bones to be strong. So I think we're forgetting that strength training doesn't also just make you strong in your event. It's going to make you strong when you're done with your events and you're not completely laying on the floor for days because you're so obliterated from that event that you can't do anything afterwards.
Yeah.
Even when you get older, you're strong enough, you can still continually do the events and your knees aren't ripped apart. So I think it goes back to what is your purpose for doing all this and making yourself feel so good on that one day.
Yeah. Agreed. Yeah. I think a macro approach to that and sort of big picture is definitely important. Well, thank you so much, Lori, for this. And I should say, as you sort of alluded to, doing some work for UESCA. So Lori is currently creating our final certification for UESCA, which is our strength and conditioning certification. So that will hopefully be coming out in the coming months. I know a lot of your work is a lot of your time is going to that for now. So something to be on the lookout for, and all this cool research that she discussed will obviously be in there as well. So, well, thank you so much, Lori. This has been great. I appreciate your time.
Yeah, thanks so much. I loved being on it. I love talking about this. And I hope it helps coaches be more motivated to do strength training. And I hope the certification gives enough guidance to coaches to want to be really good at strength training, whatever type of endurance coach you are and athlete you are. Yeah, I just enjoyed this and I love, teaching and educating and talking to you also. So thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thank you. All right. Well, hopefully we can do this again. Maybe after the S&C comes out, certification, we can do this again and maybe even do something live, take questions or something like that.
Okay, that sounds great. Thanks, Rick.
All right. Thank you.